Has the bloodline finally crossed a line they cannot return from? Because tonight, the WWE Universe is reeling after what can only be described as the darkest chapter yet in the saga of Roman Reigns' fractured legacy. In the space of a single night, amid flashing police lights, shattered egos, and broken steel gates, Solo Sikoa, the reigning United States champion, has gone from tribal enforcer to criminal suspect. And now, with the echoes of sirens still fresh in the air, he's turned his fury toward the one man who refused to bow to him, Jacob Fatu. What began as a silent war inside locker room shadows has just exploded under the blinding lights of SummerSlam. And at the center of it all, a steel cage. But before we uncover the final confrontation that forced Adam Pearce's hand, before we break down the arrest, the betrayal, and the whispered threats exchanged backstage, we must first understand how the quietest member of the Anoa'i family became its most dangerous. Because this isn't just about pride. This is about blood, and tonight, that blood may finally spill. It began like any other Friday night on Smackdown. Fans packed the arena with tribal war chants echoing through the stands, chants for Solo Sikoa, the silent executioner of the bloodline, and chants for Jacob Fatu, the man who dared to defy him. But behind the curtain, chaos was unfolding. A black SUV, mangled and steaming, was found in the parking lot. Authorities rushed to the scene. The victim, a rising WWE producer, barely conscious, pulled from the wreckage. The cause? A hit and run. But what shocked everyone wasn't the crime, it was the name tied to the license plate. Solo Sikoa. According to security footage that would soon make its way into WWE's hands, a figure matching Solo's build had been spotted exiting the vehicle minutes before impact. No words. Just a hoodie. A mission. And then, the crash. Adam Pearce was reportedly pulled from his seat mid-show. Phone calls. Panic. And within minutes, 2 uniformed officers were seen making their way toward the Bloodline's locker room. What followed was pure silence, and then, the unthinkable. Solo Sikoa, stoic, unspeaking, was handcuffed and escorted from the arena. But not before whispering 4 words to an approaching Jacob Fatu, "You think you're safe?" That was when the WWE locker room changed forever. Because what fans didn't see, what wasn't aired on Smackdown, was what happened backstage at SummerSlam. While the world believed Solo had been taken into custody, insiders revealed that the charges were dropped within hours. Lack of evidence. No official identification. No witnesses willing to testify. But some say that was no accident, some say it was power, bloodline power, exerted in the shadows. And that the real confrontation was never meant to happen in a courtroom, but inside a steel cage. That's where Adam Pearce stepped in. Because what he saw, what we all saw, was a civil war between brothers. A feud that could no longer be contained by rules, alliances, or backstage security. So he made it official. At SummerSlam, Solo Sikoa would defend his United States Championship against Jacob Fatu inside a steel cage. No escape. No family. No excuses. Just vengeance, and what happened moments after that announcement changed everything. Jacob Fatu was alone in the corridor. The locker room emptied. The title match just announced. But the air around him grew still. That's when Solo returned. No security. No cameras. Just 2 men and the crackle of unfinished business. Jacob stood, unmoved, but Solo? He didn't come to talk. He came to destroy. The confrontation wasn't filmed. But a single leaked image told the story. Jacob's fists clenched, Solo's jaw bruised. And the only sound in the hallway, Jacob's words, spoken barely above a whisper, "You're not the tribal chief. You're just scared I might become him." That line echoed through the company like a war cry. Because it wasn't just a match anymore, it was a power struggle, the ghost of Roman Reigns looming above it all. And the cage? The cage had become more than steel, it had become destiny. But here's the question the WWE Universe is now asking. What pushed Solo Sikoa this far? Because behind the bravado, behind the war paint and silence, lies a man whose grip on the bloodline is beginning to slip. With Roman Reigns absent, with Paul Heyman silent, with Zilla Fatu siding with Jacob, and with Jay and Jimmy still caught between loyalty and survival, Solo has only one thing left to prove, that fear still belongs to him, and to do that, he must break the man who refuses to bow. Jacob Fatu, the cousin who defied the pecking order, the enforcer who walks like a king but never kneels. The one man who knows that Solo isn't just cracking under pressure. He's shattering. Now, the world watches, not just because of the title, not just because of the cage, but because for the first time since the collapse of the original bloodline, two successors have declared war. One, backed by legacy, the other, born in silence. And when that steel door shuts, there will be no head of the table. No council, no shield, just tribal rage. And a question that has haunted the Anoa'i family since Roman Reigns disappeared into the night: who will rise from the ashes of the bloodline, and who will be left buried beneath it? The parking lot confrontation may be over. The handcuffs may be off. But for Solo Sikoa, the war has just begun. Because he didn't just lose control that night, he lost something even more terrifying. He lost his grip on the narrative. For months, Solo had positioned himself as the final authority in the crumbling empire Roman Reigns left behind. He didn't speak often, but when he did, the message was clear: loyalty or exile. And most of the locker room listened. Until Jacob Fatu walked in. Jacob wasn't handed anything. He didn't show up in a crown. He didn't demand allegiance. He walked through the chaos and earned every ounce of fear that followed. The moment he arrived, things changed. The aura that Solo once carried, the silent fear he instilled, began to waver. Because Jacob wasn't just another cousin. He was the reminder of everything Solo feared most: authenticity. While Solo had power, Jacob had presence. While Solo had the title, Jacob had the people, and in WWE, that distinction is everything. Backstage, whispers grew. Referees, producers, even Paul Heyman, everyone began to ask the same thing: who's the real threat now? And Solo knew it. That's why the arrest didn't feel like a loss, it felt like a tactic. An explosion of desperation disguised as dominance. If he couldn't scare Jacob with reputation, he'd do it with chaos. But he miscalculated one thing. Jacob Fatu does not flinch. When Adam Pearce declared the steel cage match official, it was more than an announcement. It was a warning. To Solo, your violence will no longer go unanswered. To Jacob, the stage is now yours to claim, or to crumble under. And Pearce knows something that few dare admit: this isn't about the United States Championship anymore. This is a tribal reckoning, and in tribal war, there are no countouts, no alliances, no mercy. Inside that cage, only one man walks out with control of the bloodline's future. Back in the locker room, footage surfaced. Blurry. Grainy. But undeniable. Jacob Fatu, minutes after the confrontation, slamming the steel door shut behind him. His knuckles bloodied. His eyes locked on the camera. He didn't say a word, he didn't need to. The message was clear: SummerSlam isn't a match. It's a funeral. And the world will be watching the burial. Meanwhile, Solo has gone silent again. No statements, no interviews. Just a single post on WWE's official channels, a shadowy image of him wrapping his fists, surrounded by cage bars. The caption? Steel remembers. What does that mean? No one knows. But some believe it's a callback to what Roman once said to Seth Rollins years ago. The cage doesn't forget. And neither do I. Now, it's Solo's war cry. But even war cries can echo hollow when the soldiers begin to turn away. Because here's the twist: some bloodline members are choosing sides. Zilla Fatu, once aligned with Solo, hasn't been seen with him since the hit-and-run incident. Sources say he's been training privately with Jacob. JUSO, too, has reportedly declined to appear on Smackdown next week, citing moral conflict in the aftermath of Solo's actions. Even Paul Heyman, normally the voice behind chaos, has gone radio silent. When asked by Kayla Braxton for a statement, Heyman simply replied, "No comment. For now." That silence is louder than any scream. Because in WWE, when Heyman stops talking, it means the war has gone off script. And now, all eyes are on SummerSlam. Not because it's another pay-per-view. Not because of the merchandise, or the entrances, or even the championship itself. But because this time, fans will witness the collision of two bloodline heirs, one born of fire, the other, of silence, and inside that cage, with nowhere to run, one of them will break. The only question is, will it be the man who controls the title? Or the man who controls the narrative? Jacob Fatu has been underestimated for years. Told he didn't fit the mold, too raw, too unpredictable, too dangerous, but that's exactly why he matters, because WWE is no longer looking for royalty. It's looking for revolution, and Jacob is revolution, but Solo Sikoa? He's not going down quietly. This is a man who was forged in shadows. Who watched Roman Reigns manipulate the throne, and learned how to destroy those who questioned it. He knows Jacob isn't just a threat to his title, he's a threat to his legacy, to his claim as the next head of the table. To the entire structure the bloodline built brick by brutal brick. And that's why Solo isn't just fighting for survival. He's fighting to erase Jacob from the story. But maybe it's too late, because Jacob Fatu isn't just part of the story now. He is the story, and at SummerSlam, with the cage closed and the world watching, we'll find out whether Solo Sikoa can still dominate by fear, or whether the man once called the Savage King will finally wear the crown. Because this isn't just a match, this is a reckoning. And once that steel cage door slams shut, only one man walks out with the future in his hands. The other will be left behind, crushed beneath the weight of legacy, guilt, and betrayal. Forever remembered, as the moment the bloodline broke for good. The cage stands now, not just as a barrier, but as a crucible. Welded steel. Screws bolted tight. Reinforced doors that creak with history. It has held legends before, witnessed betrayals that shattered careers and rebirths that redefined them. But on this night at SummerSlam, it is holding something else entirely: vengeance. Tribal vengeance. Backstage, the energy is heavy. You can feel it in the way staff members whisper when Solo Sikoa walks past. You can see it in the eyes of Jacob Fatu as he laces his boots, not with calm, but with conviction. Both men know what's coming. They've known it for weeks. Long before the hit and run. Long before the arrest. Long before Adam Pearce was forced to strip away the pageantry and say what everyone else was too afraid to admit: this isn't about a title anymore. This is about a kingdom. A birthright. A broken dynasty bleeding in real time. There is something about Solo's silence that has changed. It used to be cold, composed, unreadable. Now, it feels erratic. Haunted. Like a man not calculating his next move, but bracing for his final one. The reports from his locker room have been strange: shouting fits, broken mirrors, the United States title belt hurled into a wall so hard the metal cracked. Whatever this confrontation means to Jacob Fatu. To Solo, it feels like the end of something he can't stop. His face, always carved from granite, now looks pale. Drawn. As if even he knows the storm he helped summon may consume him too. And what of Jacob Fatu? There's no bravado in his walk. No performance. Only the look of a man who has waited too long for this night to arrive. He has no entourage. No lighting cues. No Paul Heyman to clutch his wrist and whisper strategy. There is only him, and the firestorm he has chosen to walk into. Some say Jacob's rise was inevitable. That Roman Reigns knew it. That Solo knew it. That's why they tried to keep him distant, buried behind cousins, hidden under narratives of lineage and control. But stories like Jacob Fatu's, they don't stay buried. They rise. They burn through the walls meant to contain them. As the crowd roars in the background, the camera cuts once more to the steel cage. It looms. Sharp. Inevitable. Solo enters first, title still in hand, but no longer raised. It drags at his side like a weapon he no longer trusts. His eyes dart to the cage corners, to the floor, anywhere but the entrance ramp. And when Jacob Fatu finally appears, stepping out into the smoke and spotlight, something changes in the air. The cheers don't just rise, they quake. It's not about who the fans like more. It's about the feeling in their bones. The sensation that something irreversible is about to happen. They face each other. No introductions. No microphone. The referee doesn't even bother pretending this will be a clean bout. The bell rings, and the door slams shut behind them. And suddenly, everything disappears. There is no commentary. No backstage politics. No titles. No legacy. Only two men with blood between them. One trying to defend what he thinks is his. The other here to claim what he knows should have never been taken. The first punch isn't flashy. It's not caught in a camera-friendly angle. It lands with the sickening sound of knuckle against jaw. And just like that, the fight begins, not as wrestlers, but as family. Jacob doesn't flinch. He moves like someone raised in chaos, someone whose pain tolerance was developed in backyards and alleyways, not performance centers. He absorbs Solo's blows like thunder, each one fueling a storm of his own. When he retaliates, it's not one punch, it's an avalanche. Corner shots. A slam into the cage so violent the steel rattles loose dust from the rafters. Solo tries to retreat, but there is nowhere to go. There are no ropes for backup. No ring exits for strategy. Only steel. And judgment. Backstage, Roman Reigns' name is whispered for the first time in months. No one says it on air. But his shadow is there. In every look Solo gives the ceiling. In every moment Jacob steps forward, daring someone to stop him. Because this war, is what Roman feared most. That the bloodline wouldn't be defeated from the outside. It would implode from within. Solo mounts a counter. He slams Jacob onto the steel floor with a spinebuster so hard it echoes like a dropped anvil. He screams, not words, but something primal. A howl torn from deep within his soul. For a moment, he looks down at Jacob like he's already won. But then Jacob rises. Not slowly. Not dazed. He rises like a man who's just remembered why he came. Solo backs away. Jacob pounces. The cage isn't a weapon anymore, it's an accomplice. Jacob grinds Solo's face into it, metal meeting skin, drawing blood that trickles from the corner of Solo's brow. The audience gasps. Some cheer. Some recoil. But no one looks away. This is no longer a wrestling match. It's a tribal exorcism. And Solo Sikoa is the demon being dragged into the light. As the minutes pass, the match devolves into brutality. Steel chairs tossed through the cage door before it locks again. Suplexes into the wall. Desperate escapes up the cage sides, only to be yanked down mid-climb. Neither man wants to escape. They want the other to break. And then it happens. Solo finds the opening. A low blow, unseen by the referee. Jacob drops, the wind stolen from his chest. Solo climbs. He doesn't want a pin. He wants out. He wants the crowd to see him above Jacob, one foot on the cage wall, the other on the edge of escape. But then he stops. He looks down. And Jacob is standing. Somehow, impossibly, standing. Bruised, bleeding, smiling, the smile is not joyful, it's not taunting. It's ancestral, it says, you can leave, but you'll never rule. Solo's eyes widen. He drops back down. He doesn't want to win anymore. He wants to erase Jacob from history. He charges. But Jacob was waiting. And with one final roar, he lifts Solo into the air, Samoan drop, onto a steel chair. The crowd erupts, the cage rattles, Solo doesn't move, and in that moment, Jacob looks to the crowd. He doesn't climb, he pins, 1, 2, 3, it's over, but the silence is deafening. Because something far greater than a title just shifted. The cage opens, officials rush in, Solo is motionless, the title belt is handed to Jacob Fatu, but he doesn't look at it, he looks at Solo, not with hate. But with something more dangerous, pity, because deep down, even Jacob knows this wasn't just a win, it was a burial, the bloodline as we knew it, is over. Backstage, Paul Heyman is seen pacing, phone pressed to his ear, his face pale. Reporters try to get a word. He says nothing. Adam Pearce issues a brief statement. There is no more debate. Jacob Fatu is the United States champion. And this war is far from over. But inside the arena, none of that matters. Jacob walks out alone, title in one hand, legacy in the other. And behind him? Solo Sikoa still hasn't stood, and maybe he never will, because some wars don't end in silence. They end in reckoning, and in the steel cage that night, the reckoning came for Solo, and it came wearing Jacob Fatu's name. They say every kingdom falls. But what no one ever tells you, is what happens to the ones who are left behind to bury it. Because when the cage lowered, when the lights dimmed and the replays ended, what remained wasn't just a battered Solo Sikoa lying in the ring, it was a prophecy fulfilled. The empire Roman Reigns spent years building on intimidation and legacy had been reduced to silence, blood, and breathless defeat. And somewhere backstage, behind layers of walls and camera blocks, Solo sat alone, staring at the floor like it was the only thing left that would listen. The doctors told him to stay still. The medics insisted he needed stitches. But Solo said nothing. He hadn't spoken a word since the 3 count. He didn't even flinch when the camera light briefly flicked into the hallway to capture what could only be described as the end of his warpath. He had spent months fighting shadows. Fighting Jacob. Fighting Zilla. Fighting ghosts. Fighting himself. And now, he had nothing left to fight. For the first time, the silence didn't feel like power. It felt like loss. Back in the production truck, someone leaked the footage. Grainy. Muted. A single shot of Solo Sikoa seated on the bench in the trainer's room. A towel draped around his neck. Blood trickling down his temple. Eyes unfocused. For 30 seconds, he doesn't move. Then, quietly, he weeps. Not with screams. Not with theatrics. Just one hand over his face. Shoulders shaking. The enforcer, broken. And the entire locker room knew it. Because when a man like Solo cries, it isn't for attention. It's because something inside has finally shattered. The first to arrive wasn't Paul Heyman. It wasn't Jimmy. It wasn't Zilla or Jay. It was an assistant. A young WWE staffer who gently placed Solo's phone beside him and walked away. He didn't say a word. He didn't ask for a picture. But that phone held messages that Solo didn't dare open. Because he knew, somewhere in that inbox was the message he had feared most. From Roman. And Roman's silence was always louder than any threat. Meanwhile, in a separate corridor, Jacob Fatu stood in front of a mirror. The United States title rested against his hip, but his eyes weren't focused on it. He was staring at himself. Not with arrogance. Not with pride. But with clarity. He knew what he had just done. He had just ended a chapter in bloodline history that was never meant to last. He had walked into the cage as the disruptor. The cousin no one expected. The warrior too volatile to fit into the mold Roman had created. And now? Now, he was something else entirely. He wasn't the head of the table. He wasn't the tribal chief. He was the storm that the table couldn't survive. When a backstage interviewer tried to get a statement, Jacob didn't offer a catchphrase or a boast. He simply said, "Blood made us family. But war made me king." Then he walked away. Paul Heyman watched everything. Not from ringside. Not from gorilla position. From the shadows. His eyes locked on a monitor, his fingers twitching, his heart racing like it hadn't since the night Roman Reigns first became champion. For weeks, Heyman had remained in exile, caught between loyalty and strategy, between survival and betrayal. He watched Solo descend into chaos. He watched Zilla join Jacob. He watched Jay disappear and Jimmy hide. And now, he had seen the last card fall. The silence that surrounded Heyman was deafening. But inside, wheels were turning. Because if there's one thing Paul Heyman knows better than anyone, it's that when empires crumble, power doesn't vanish. It shifts. And someone has to pick it up. Later that night, long after the fans had left and the lights in the arena had dimmed to black, a quiet conversation took place behind a locked door. Paul Heyman entered the medical room. Solo didn't look up. Heyman stood in silence for a moment. Then spoke just one sentence. "You were never supposed to fight him alone." Solo didn't answer. He didn't need to. Because Heyman wasn't here to offer comfort. He was here to offer resurrection. Because the bloodline, fractured though it may be, still had value. It still had fear. And in Heyman's world, fear is a currency. Solo Sikoa may have fallen. But Heyman? Heyman had just begun writing the next chapter. The next morning, WWE issued a quiet statement. No press conference. No fanfare. Just a single graphic on their homepage. New United States Champion crowned at SummerSlam, Jacob Fatu. Beneath it, a quote from Adam Pearce. "This isn't the end. It's the beginning of something much bigger." Backstage, the whispers intensified. Would Roman Reigns return? Would Solo disappear? Would Paul Heyman realign with someone new? But the loudest whispers weren't about the future. They were about a message found scrawled on Solo's locker the next day. No one knows who wrote it. No cameras caught it. But everyone saw it. Just 4 words. "Cages don't forget kings." And beneath it? A smear of blood. Solo's? Maybe. Or maybe, just maybe. The war that ended at SummerSlam was never meant to end at all. Days passed. But no one moved on. Because you can't move on when something this big, this brutal, has just torn through the soul of WWE. The arena may have emptied. The lights may have shut off. But the energy, the aftershock, remained trapped in the air like smoke refusing to clear. Solo Sikoa had fallen. Jacob Fatu stood victorious. But what came next was more terrifying than any match. Silence. And it wasn't just from Solo. It was from Roman Reigns. The tribal chief. The godfather of this empire. The one whose voice once sent chills through championship corridors, had said nothing. No tweet. No video. Not even a phone call. Sources close to WWE say he watched SummerSlam from his home in California. A small, private theater. No entourage. Just him, and the past unraveling on screen. The man who once led the most dominant faction in WWE history, watching the empire collapse from a distance. But Roman has never been the kind of man to respond emotionally. He doesn't retaliate in the moment. He calculates. He plans. And then, when the timing is perfect, he returns. And maybe that's what Paul Heyman is counting on. Because while the WWE Universe debates whether Jacob Fatu will now lead a new bloodline, Heyman has been doing what he always does best, sowing seeds. Small things. Quiet calls to locker room veterans. Cryptic check-ins with Jimmy USO. Even a brief, unconfirmed sighting near NXT headquarters, sparking rumors that Heyman may be scouting fresh blood to replace the fallen pieces of Solo's faction. But it's what happened on the most recent episode of Smackdown that confirmed it. A single backstage segment. No dialogue. Just a slow shot of Heyman standing in the hallway, watching Jacob Fatu pass by. Their eyes met. Heyman didn't smile. Jacob didn't nod. And yet, in that single second, the WWE Universe held its breath. Was it respect? Was it rivalry? Or was it recruitment? Because the one truth that has defined Paul Heyman for decades is this: he does not serve the weak. He does not serve the fallen. He serves power. And right now, the power belongs to Jacob. Or at least, it appears to. But Solo Sikoa isn't gone. Not really. After the match, he vanished from TV. His social media wiped. No appearance on Raw. None on Smackdown. But WWE cameras caught a glimpse, fleeting, almost accidental, of a figure entering the Performance Center in Orlando. Black hoodie. Tattooed hand. And a familiar walk. It was Solo. And he wasn't alone. Behind him? A man with his face covered. Unidentified. Silent. But large. Dangerous. Speculation ran wild. Is Solo building something? Is this his version of revenge? Because here's what fans need to understand: Solo Sikoa is not just a bruiser. He is a survivor. He grew up watching brothers turn on brothers. He watched Roman rise. He watched Jimmy break. He watched Jay disappear. And now, having tasted defeat, Solo isn't licking his wounds. He's sharpening his claws. Jacob Fatu, for his part, seems unbothered. He's made one thing clear in his first interview since winning the title: I didn't come here to be loved. I came here to take what should have been mine from the start. But love is arriving anyway. The fans chant his name louder each week. The WWE Universe has embraced him, not just as a force, but as a consequence. A living punishment for the sins of a corrupt dynasty. A man born of blood, but loyal to none. And that's what scares WWE's top brass most. Jacob isn't forming a faction. He's not playing politics. He's not strategizing backstage. He's just showing up and hurting people. And now, with the US title on his waist and no one brave enough to confront him directly, he has nothing holding him back. But that freedom may also be his weakness. Because Paul Heyman thrives in control. And nothing about Jacob Fatu is controllable. So what happens when Heyman realizes that? What happens when Roman returns and finds the seat at the head of the table already filled? That's where the next chapter begins. Because Roman Reigns won't come back to reclaim a belt. He'll come back to reclaim order. And Solo, bruised and bitter, may become his greatest weapon, or his greatest liability. Sources backstage believe the bloodline isn't reforming, it's evolving. And the new version may not include the brothers we remember. It may not include the family ties that once held them together. It may not even include Heyman. Because this time, Roman won't return to save. He'll return to destroy what's left. And from those ashes? Build something colder. Something meaner. Something untouchable. But until that day comes, the WWE landscape belongs to Jacob Fatu. A champion with no allegiance. A warrior with no leash. And the only man who stood toe-to-toe with the bloodline and walked away, untouched. But even he must know. You don't dethrone gods, without consequences. And somewhere, whether in the shadows of the Performance Center or the private halls of Roman's home in California, judgment is coming. And it wears a Samoan tattoo. And it speaks, in silence. The locker room had grown used to silence. Used to the fact that Roman Reigns was no longer walking those backstage corridors. Used to the idea that Paul Heyman was just a ghost, appearing only when he sensed power changing hands. Used to Solo Sikoa marching like a lone wolf, his violence doing the talking. But what no one expected was how suddenly that silence would shatter. It happened not in the middle of a show, but right before it. At the start of Smackdown, no build-up, no warning. Just a shot of a black SUV pulling up outside the arena. The door opened. A polished boot stepped onto the pavement. Then another, and then a long coat, glasses. The shadowed silhouette of a man who hadn't been seen in months. And just like that, Roman Reigns was back. No commentary, no music. Just the image. And the sound of the crowd in the arena exploding before the show had even gone live. Because for the first time since SummerSlam, the tribal blood that built this empire had returned to collect. The locker room was paralyzed. Jacob Fatu, watching on a backstage monitor, didn't flinch. He just nodded once. Slowly. He knew this was coming. He didn't know when, but he knew. Because his win at SummerSlam wasn't just about a championship. It was a provocation. And provocations come with consequences. Across the arena, Solo Sikoa sat in a dark room, alone again. He didn't move when the screen showed Roman arriving. Didn't blink. Just stared. Like he was watching a ghost he wasn't sure was real. But deep down, he knew exactly what this meant. Roman wasn't back to praise. He was back to punish. And yet, it wasn't anger on Roman's face when he entered the building. It was something colder. Measured. It wasn't the Roman who shouted "Acknowledge me" from the center of the ring. It was the Roman who whispered in your ear while the world watched you fall. The one who didn't need to yell anymore, because silence had become his deadliest weapon. By the time he reached the curtain, the building was already shaking. Cameras caught Heyman pacing near gorilla position, sweat on his brow, unsure if he was about to be embraced or exiled. And then the theme hit. That thunderous, slow, almost funeral-like tribal beat. And Roman Reigns walked through the curtain. The head of the table.